What if I told you there were incredibly profitable MLB DFS contests that can actually lower your overall variance hiding in plain sight in the DFS lobby, and you have a secret weapon specifically designed to beat them? In this video, I'll break down exactly why I recommend playing MLB Showdown contests and give you the keys to building profitable lineups for them. But make sure to stick around through the end of this video, where I'll walk through exactly how you can make sure that you're playing these contests profitably. So why play MLB Showdown? Well, the main reason, of course, is that they are very beatable contests when you have a play-by-play MLB simulation at your disposal. Showdowns in any sport are very hard to beat with average projections alone. You need to understand the full range of possible game scripts and be able to generate the optimal lineups for those individual game scripts, and that's exactly what a simulation like SaberSim does. And I'll walk through exactly how to do that, how to get these lineups in SaberSim in just a second, but the value of these contests in your overall MLB DFS portfolio does go beyond just these contests being a beatable game format. Showdowns can dramatically lower the variance of your MLB DFS play, both within the context of individual slates, but also over the course of the entire season. Within an individual day of baseball games, your results in the main slate alone are high variance, meaning your range of outcomes is wide, and most likely you're going to lose money. That's just how GPPs are. If you miss big on one game on a main slate, it can basically sink your entire lineup portfolio for that slate. But if you're mixing in showdowns, your lineups in those showdown contests would still be live to win if you completely missed on one big game on the main. The main idea here is that your results in any given showdown is completely uncorrelated to each other showdown you play and only slightly correlated to your results in the main slate, assuming that that showdown is even on the main slate. So even if you play main slates with highly diversified sets of lineups, $200, for example, played and split up amongst the main slate and multiple showdowns is a lower variance application of that bankroll than $200 played entirely into the main slate. MLB Showdowns also work to lower your variance over the course of the entire season. With around 200 or so main slates over the course of the year, MLB DFS does give us more opportunities to realize our expected value than other DFS sports. But even if we're playing every single slate and playing extremely profitably, it is still very possible for us to have losing or break-even seasons. If you're looking for a throwback to one of my very first SaberSim videos I recorded, I actually proved this idea with a simple simulation built in a Google Sheet. I'll drop the link to that video in the description of this video if you want to see more on that. But playing additional uncorrelated slates in the form of MLB Showdown every day gets us more shots on goal for a big win over the course of the entire season. The law of large numbers says our actual ROI will approach our expected ROI as we increase the sample size more and more. So adding additional slates to our portfolio in a way that does not increase our variance on individual days of MLB DFS is a win-win situation for DFS players. Now, I want to be clear that the idea that MLB Showdowns lower your DFS variance is true when we're thinking about these contests on average at high volume across a large amount of them. Any individual MLB Showdown contest is still very high variance. In fact, it's probably higher variance than the main slate for that day because you need to nail very close to the optimal scoring lineup to win. But you can reach 200 showdowns played, approximately the amount of main slates available the entire MLB season, in around 6 weeks if you're grinding these really hard, and that's where we really see the value of these contests. So how do you effectively add MLB Showdowns to your contest portfolio? Well, first, your goal with these should be to play as many as you can. There is a life EV component here for sure, and I understand you might not want to spend all of your summer evenings building showdown lineups for all 4, 5, or 6 showdowns offered each night, but MLB Showdowns are a volume game, and to maximize the value as a part of your lineup portfolio, you really want to be playing as many of them as you can. Second, you don't want to allocate your bankroll to these so aggressively that your risk of ruin is suddenly way higher than it was when you were just playing main slates. You should be mindful of your total bankroll allocation for a day of games. While the showdowns are uncorrelated to each other, your results don't correlate in one showdown to another, it's still very possible to run particularly bad on a day of baseball games and lose a big chunk of your bankroll. In general, I try to avoid exposing more than 10% of my baseball bankroll across all of the different contests I'm playing that day, including classic and showdown slates, and I try to stick to around a 2% maximum bankroll allocation per individual showdown. Your risk tolerance might be different than mine, but avoid putting yourself in a situation where your risk of ruin is outpacing the benefits you're gaining by mixing these contests in. And third, MLB Showdowns can be a particularly good way to get extra action down against the softest competition in the MLB lobby. Remember that the pros can't play contests under $3 entry fees, but there is a limited number of these contests available on main slates alone. So I particularly like incorporating MLB Showdown contests if your bankroll is large enough that you need to play contests higher than the $3 entry fees on the main slate to get enough action down, because instead of jumping into tougher contests on the main slate, you can dump that action into sub $3 contests on all the showdowns and use it against easier opponents. When it comes to your lineup building strategy, I recommend keeping a lean and efficient process where you are maximizing the value of our play-by-play simulations and mostly focusing on avoiding mistakes. My goal with these contests when I'm building is not to spend a ton of time researching each individual game to incrementally increase my ROI for that particular slate. My goal is to play in a fundamentally sound and profitable way and play as many of these contests as possible. I recommend simply building your lineups on the default settings on SaberSim for each slate, remembering that as you do so, you're building out a pool of thousands of lineups, each of which is the perfect lineup for an individual game script of that game. So to do that, just fire up the slate in SaberSim, open up your build settings, make sure you've made 2 changes to DraftKings player projections, and otherwise, I'm going to leave all of this as default and just hit build lineups. Now, what SaberSim is doing again here is essentially simulating out this Blue Jays and Red Sox game 2,000 times, giving me the optimal lineup for each of those different game scripts. And in just a second, we'll go ahead and sort through and identify the most profitable ones to play. Now, if you're planning on playing MLB Showdown at high volume, I strongly recommend a SaberSim Ultimate plan, which will give you access to our contest simulations. At this part in the process, our contest sims will take each lineup we've built in our pool here and simulate out its performance in an expected version of what we expect Showdown contests to look like for this slate, which lets us really quickly identify the most profitable ones to play. Knowing that you're probably playing 3, 4, 5 of these slates a day, having an efficient way to identify the best lineups as possible is extremely valuable for making this a time-efficient process. So to get a contest sim set up here, all I'm going to do is go to the contest tab, find a contest that I might be playing on this particular slate here. Maybe it's the solo shot, which is just the $1.20 max. I'll add the contest sim by right-clicking, save the settings, and when I go back to my build here now, I should have a contest sim loaded up in my contest sim settings, and I can just click run contest sim. It's going to take each of my 2,000 lineups and assume I put it into that $1.20 max and see how it would perform if that slate played out or if this game played out 100,000 times. From here, all I need to do is sort by ROI, and this will identify the top 20 best lineups I could play in this particular contest based on the contest simulation. Now, once you've done this, this is where I spend a bit of time to make sure I'm limiting any potential mistakes in my lineup. And the first thing that I'm looking for is relief pitchers. Part of the value of building lineups with simulation is you're appropriately accounting for the upside of these players. Relief pitchers do play. They do have upside outcomes where maybe they come in, they pitch an inning, and they strike out the side, and they're in the optimal lineup for that slate. Building with average projections, because of how low their projections are on average, is basically never going to get a relief pitcher into your lineups, but our simulations don't account for when relief pitchers last pitched. So I do typically like to check to see if I'm getting any of them in my pool and making sure that if I do, they didn't pitch the day prior or they haven't pitched a ton recently. Now, I like to use RotoWire's bullpen usage tool for this, and I'll typically just X out any pitcher that pitched the day prior from my pool completely using this tool. I'll also keep an eye out for maybe pitchers that have pitched a ton in the last 3 days, even if they didn't pitch just lineups the day before, just to make sure I'm not getting a guy that has no chance to come into the game at all. I'm okay taking a 0 on a relief pitcher in my lineup because I just ran bad and it wasn't the right game script for them to come into the game, as long as they have a reasonable shot of being used in the bullpen for that particular game here. So in this particular example, I don't actually have any relief pitchers showing up in my pool in the captain or utility spot here, but I would be going through and looking at, for both the Blue Jays and the Red Sox, any of these relievers to make sure that they hadn't pitched the day prior, or they hadn't in particular pitched a ton in the last 3 days. Now, the only other thing I'd be aware of here as you're building your lineups is to resist the urge to cross out unconventional looking lineups. In a single game, things like a pitcher with a bunch of hitters from the opposing team can absolutely be the perfect lineup for a given game script. And in general, just avoid the rules of thumb about lineup constructions that you might use on main slates when it comes to Baseball Showdown. The more wacky your lineup might look, the less likely it is to be duplicated by others in your contest. And remember, each lineup in your pool is the optimal for a given game script. So we know that there are outcomes of these games where this lineup is optimal, and we're sorting by the ones we expect to be the most profitable here. So if you see something weird, a lot of other people would think that lineup is weird too and make them a little bit less likely to play it. But we know that these lineups have upside because they had the upside necessary to be the top scoring lineups in the contest sim. Now, as you start to incorporate these MLB Showdown contests into your portfolio, I recommend taking advantage of SaberSim's contest flashback to check your work and make sure that you're playing these contests profitably. Our contest flashback tool takes the real lineups played in past contests, resimulates the slate 100,000 times, and provides the expected ROI of each lineup and of each user that played that contest. Remember, each showdown you play individually is high variance. Your expectation should be to lose most of them, but by playing a ton of them at volume, you make it much easier to realize your ROI over the course of the season. But this is only true if your expected ROI is actually profitable, and you can verify this part with contest flashback. When reviewing your past slates, I wouldn't worry about any one individual slate too much. Instead, focus on what you're seeing at large, making sure that you are on average showing up as a profitable player, and if you've followed my steps so far, I expect that you will. It's as easy as when you enter your lineups for the next day, just pop into the contest flashback tool by navigating to a past day on the calendar here, going to the contest tab and finding a contest that you played on that particular slate. I, in particular, like to look at other users that played the same amount of entries as I did, particularly those that are also maxing a contest, and sorting by sim ROI. I didn't play this particular contest here, but you would just want to make sure that you are showing up in general as having a profitable ROI here, which means as we play these at scale and at high volume, you will achieve that ROI as you get a bunch of these under your belt. And while I love using contest flashback on MLB Showdowns to make sure my volume-based strategy is actually working, there is way more you can do with this particular tool across all of your different MLB DFS slates. You can learn how to get the most out of this contest flashback tool in my guide in the next video, and make sure to subscribe to get notified every time I drop another strategy guide. I'll see you in the next video.